marketing, like you said, 80% of the buyer journey is handled hands off, not touching sales. And then if you're like many people are in a SaaS or a subscription based organization, marketing is touching that customer journey, that renewal, that further expansion.
Welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer Podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Okay, B2BDM gang. Now, some of you are always put under the gun that are in marketing, trying to actually validate your existence, validate your work, prove worth, value, all those types of things. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and why that stuff happens and how you can prevent it. And so you can actually have a situation where you're delivering and not worrying. Big difference. Because we have Aaron Branson on the show with us. Aaron, welcome.
Hello. Hey, thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Now, I actually have shared with you before we started recording, and we'll share it on the air, a story of a situation where there was a significant axe that came down on a marketing department, which to me was kind of extreme, but also for me, it wasn't a shock. Because you see these things, happening all the time and you hear about them all the time. But before we get into that, if you could share a little bit about your background and experience with the B2BDM gang.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I've been in marketing, high tech, internet, B2B marketing for 20 plus years. Started primarily on the agency side, co-founded a web development, digital marketing consulting agency, ran that for 12 years. Flipped over to the corporate marketing side, been head of marketing for a cybersecurity startup, more of a scale up at this point after 8 years. And most recently, kind of taken the combination of both of those experiences of being in the software UX and development world, and then in the corporate marketing, B2B marketing world, and have co-founded a new product called Rembach Marketing, which is a marketing financial management platform to kind of be the CMO's best friend to help bridge this divide with the CEO.
Okay, so that's the financial piece about it, which can have some interesting nuances as well as struggles, because oftentimes people talk about attribution and value of the marketing department, all those types of things, and we'll get into that. But so I actually want to tell you about this situation that I learned about just last week. And so when we're actually sitting here and looking at this particular situation, it seems kind of mind-boggling what they did, but they did it. And that is, the organization was actually spun off from a much larger organization. And it started operating as its own entity. They spun it off. They say they're only a couple years old, but they've actually been operating a little bit longer than that under the umbrella of this other parent company. However, the first 2 years in operation, they more than doubled the operation of the business when they were independent. And the third year, they started running a little bit flat. Well, within that third year, because the revenues weren't coming in at the expected numbers, they started looking at areas where they could cut. Because oftentimes, unfortunately, that's what we do, is we go there first instead of trying to look for other growth opportunities. But that's what they did. And they basically did away with their senior level marketing leaders. They actually fired some of the marketing relationships they had that were helping them from a brand perspective and content development and promotion and all that. And basically did off with most of their marketing functions. And they were telling me this, and they're like, well, we think we know it was extreme. And I'm like, you think?
Yeah.
What do you say to an organization who is not just looking at the whole axing of the marketing area, but just looking at justifying marketing as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. Talking to your audience here, as marketers, we get it. We see the value. We innately see the value of marketing as the face of the organization to the public, to the customers, to the partners, to the media, to investors, and beyond. And it's obvious to us. The problem we have, though, typically, and in that situation, obviously, is perception and messaging to the C-suite, which is very ironic because that's what marketing does, perception, messaging. We're so focused on doing our job, and that's fantastic, but we have to manage the marketing team's reputation, perception, and messaging and business value up the ladder as well, so that we get them comfortable and confident in what we're doing as an investment, so that we can do what we do. And in this example that you outlined, it sounds to me like the common case where marketing is perceived as a short-term investment, almost a bubblegum machine. Put in $1 and I'm going to get $2 of customer out immediately in the same month, in the same quarter, whatever it may be. But marketing's got to be looked at in three slices. Short-term investment, yes. Feed the sales machine, keep the pipeline building, bring in the leads, yes. But that's 1/3 of it. There's the mid-term investment, building brand trust and reputation, because buyers aren't dumb and they own the process. 70-90% of their work in the B2B space they do on their own before they shortlist who they're going to reach out to. So building brand is an investment in the next 2 years pipeline. And then third, the long-term investment, your customers, your partners, their experience. Are they going to renew? Are they willing to refer? Are they willing to write reviews and fill the top of the funnel? So I look at those three investment layers, almost like an investment portfolio. You got what are you doing short-term, mid, and long-term growth with your marketing function?
Well, even as you were talking, I started thinking about the things that influence a CEO. And then I started thinking about, well, what about at the board level? I mean, to me, if I start thinking about stakeholders, while they're not going to get stuck within the day-to-day of the operation, if I'm thinking about macro marketing type of, activities and investments and things like that, I'd be thinking that I would want to engage my board.
Yeah, absolutely. And you need to be able to get a seat at that table to have that conversation, for marketing to be present directly, not through a filter of non-marketing senior managers. But how do you earn that? Some organizations, you'll be blessed to be in a spot where they get it and they're going to bring you to the table. Some, they're not. So you need to be able to speak and translate marketing attribution to marketing ROI, something that the CEO and the CFO are going to be familiar with, as far as putting a dollar value on all of those marketing outcomes, even those softer ones that are kind of tough. So you got to be methodical. You first have to define those objectives and key results that align to finding out what the business is really shooting for, and showing that marketing has OKRs that align to their business goals for the year or the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Clearly align them, put a dollar amount on it. That's a tough conversation to have, but hey, spitball it and do it yourself. Hey, if we want to be positioned as a leader in this category and be in the XYZ quadrant of the ABC report, well, what value is that to the business? CEO, CFO, why do you want to do that? Let's talk about why you want to do that. You might find, well, it's going to increase our valuation. We have an exit plan in 3 to 5 years. That's going to add X to our valuation as to investors, to potential buyers. So now, all right, let me put a conservative number on that. Now I'm putting dollar amounts on the outputs that marketing is going to produce. And now we can invest something and show a 3-5x return on that investment, even on those fuzzier things that aren't pipeline and revenue.
Well, as you're saying that, I start thinking about the situation where we're presenting information and we always have that caveat or asterisk. So when you refer to attribution, and when you start referring about things that I can essentially own an account and say that made the difference in this revenue number and activity, that's getting harder and harder for B2B.
Yeah.
When we start talking about omni touch, when we start talking about visibility, when we start, looking at that. So if I'm stuck in that particular situation, right, I also can have a scenario where a referral, situation. We didn't touch it whatsoever, right? And then it came in through us. I mean, there's all these different things that happen, and somebody's always looking for an opportunity to essentially poke holes in what we're presenting. Well, you can't own that because of boom, 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 boom. How do we combat that?
Yeah, that's extremely tough and getting harder. So, yeah, first let's make sure we're really clear about two different things. There's marketing ROI, and that's where you really want to drive these execs to think, hey, I'm the marketing professional. Let me worry about how we get there, but let me show you where we're going and what the expectations are. Are we performing? You wanted X dollars of pipeline. Okay, great. I'm going to get us there. I'm going to have a strategy to get us there. Now, as long as everything's golden and you are getting there, they should be happy, as far as seeing that summary. But of course, things aren't always great and easy. Now we got to talk about marketing attribution and show, okay, why aren't we getting there exactly? Now we can talk about, once we talked about marketing ROI and overall value that the function is bringing, now let's get into marketing ROI attribution if we need to. But it takes a ton of education. There's first touch, last touch, multi-touch attribution. We have to agree on the rules of engagement if they want to have that conversation first, And I think that's where you have to start and kind of stop the train and say, let's agree, what is attribution in your mind? I can educate you on all that's underneath there with, like you said, omni-touch. It's, the buyer journey looks like a bowl of spaghetti. They're bouncing all over the place. But yeah, education first, I think, and agreeing on those rules of what is attribution in your mind, because they're going to touch sales, they're going to touch marketing, they're going to touch lots of things.
Well, you also brought up one interesting point, and let me talk about this attribution component for just one perspective taking moment. There was a report that I read that said for one organization, there was 66 touches in regards to that attribution component in regards to the sales that they occurred. Somebody who I was on a recent peer roundtables.com senior marketing leader call said that for their organization, it was 22. So they actually had made the decision that they were a last touch attribution shop. And so like you were saying, I think they had agreed somewhere to say that, okay, this is how we're going to count this.
Right.
And that becomes critically important. But if I'm sitting there and I'm looking at a couple different things associated with building, or growing the organization, a lot of these statistics that we see can be misleading. So like, for example, somebody's going to do 80% of the research before they actually buy from us. But wait a minute. If they don't know about you, if they hadn't found you, they don't even know that they have a problem that needs to be solved. And if I think about, problem aware, solution aware, all of those types of things, that research isn't being done, right? Because they don't know. So we kind of have to break people down to say, okay, what about people who are unsure, don't know, I don't realize I have a problem. How am I going to actually try to get them and attract them? Because that's a prospecting opportunity and a nurturing and growth and trust building opportunity. I mean, if we think about it, and we oftentimes just ignore them because we're chasing that smaller group that already knows, which is for some organizations as little as 1% of your addressable market is actually buyer ready. So it's like, do I spend $100 to get one, or do I spend $100 to get 100? That's what we're really talking about here. Now, like you said, the timeline is different. These people are in market now. Well, and everybody else is going after them too. So my costs are up and all those things are up. Nobody's going after those people who haven't figured it out yet. Mm-hmm. Do I do it? Do I not? I mean, I have to kind of look at that overall continuum. So if I start thinking about marketing value, how does all of that buyer readiness come into play?
Oh, definitely great question from a strategic standpoint. Which potential buyer are you going after? How mature, how ready, and how much do you want to sacrifice by going solely for that small, perfect market slice that you think is in market right now, and therefore sacrifice any chance of getting those future buyers because you're not putting your brand and your solution in front of them in advance.
Okay, so that brings up, so what I just heard you say, and I've been doing some little bit of research in regards to personal investing, is you just called out a hedge.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, you're hedging.
Yep.
So, and that's a financial element that you can connect with the CFO with. Hey, we're kind of hedging our investments.
Yep.
And we're a little bit in the short term and high competition area. We're a little bit in this area, and then we're a little bit in this area.
Right.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. And then they'll start to see the analogy. They'll start to get a little bit more appreciation for the complexity and the thought you put into this. It isn't as simple as a non-marketing executive, a CEO, a CFO might think, as far as you're just simply buying media, putting out social media posts, and hey, just do more email marketing. It's free. Just keep hammering people. But hire another BDR, put another body on the phones. That's we got to get them over that. That's the bubblegum machine mentality of just buy another resource, hammer the audience harder, and do more. Pull that lever even harder, every time.
Well, that is the standard practice.
Mm-hmm.
That it is doing just what you said, and that is a scenario. And I think it goes back to what you referred to a second ago. Is there's a research study that talked about being unskilled and unaware. And it talks about even genders and how they inflate and assess their skills, which is quite comical, but it's called unskilled and unaware. So if I'm unskilled at something, especially if I'm in a CEO position, think about this, I'm supposed to know. But if I'm unaware because I didn't come up through those ranks, if I don't have somebody in the marketing organization at a senior level who is helping to educate me on all these things that we're talking about, guess what? I'm still unskilled and unaware.
Right.
It doesn't change. But yet, because I'm a CEO, I'm going to overinflate my skills. Oh, yeah, I know marketing.
Right.
I jokingly say that's the Holiday Inn Express syndrome. I stayed there last night. I know how to do that stuff. So if I start thinking about this tactically, right, because we can sit here all day long, and this is what I talk about. Theory is fantastic. And one of the people who I follow, who is an academic, said, hey, he goes, we're great as academics. He goes, because we can talk theory all day long and never have to put it into action. Mm-hmm. So we can sit here and talk theory all day long, but how do I put this into action? I'm sitting here and I'm saying, okay, the reality is that the pendulum's going to always swing, and I may be cruising now, okay, as far as I'm getting my marketing and budgeting approvals, and so I'm just doing my stuff, but that day's going to come. What do I need to start doing to make sure that I am ready and I'm essentially priming the pump and I'm planting the seeds so that I get my approvals instead of my reductions?
Right. Oh, yeah. Let me start with, there's an article on this exact topic. It was really good. Just 2 weeks ago by McKinsey. I'm just going to read a little snippet of it because I have it up on my screen, but it nailed what I think are the 3 key challenges, and then I'll talk about the 3 tactical ways to kind of address those in practice. So it says, our research highlights 3 disconnects the CEOs and CMOs can overcome together to ignite growth. Number 1, murkiness in C-level growth responsibilities, that murkiness. Number 2, the underestimated potential for marketing to drive growth. And the third one, and we kind of chatted about this already a little bit, the misalignment of marketing measurement and business impact. So to put those in my own words, that murkiness, number 1, is a lack of clarity and confidence by the CEO, CFO group to hold marketing accountable. They're not quite sure how to make it clearly accountable to what exactly. And then the second one, underestimated. No, this is not everyone, but if you got someone like this that you're working with, a narrow view of the business value of marketing. Marketing supports sales. And they think that's got to be flipped, quite honestly. In most organizations, everyone's got a different go-to-market, different type of deal, enterprise deal versus a low-touch e-commerce deal. But marketing, like you said, 80% of the buyer journey is handled hands-off, not touching sales. And then if you're in a, like many people are in a SaaS or a subscription-based organization, marketing is touching that customer journey, that renewal, that further expansion. And then the third one, I would call just measurement, not measuring what matters. Instead, measuring leads, measuring lead conversion rate. All that stuff is important, but that's in the weeds for the marketer to optimize the engine. So tactically, how do you address those? Number one, that murkiness, that lack of clarity and confidence. Step one is always with goals. You have to find out, you have to have the CEO and CFO articulate to you what are their goals and how do they measure that they are accomplished. You know, the classic OKR formula. And then you can say, okay, how can marketing influence each of those maybe 3 to 5 OKRs that you've outlined? And I'm going to draft an OKR from marketing standpoint that's going to be clearly measurable and align directly to that. And then we're going to have a conversation of what's the value? What's the business value? Some of it's easy. Pipeline is a percentage of a closed won customer. So I can say that's worth X. But then you got to look into, some of the softer goals that they had and put some hard numbers on that. So you've got business goal alignment. You put real dollars of value for accomplishing that. Now I can calculate and I can suggest a strategy and budget that is logical of addressing those OKRs and showing I'm not overspending. If you can show them that if I spend this to achieve that, you're getting a 5x return on investment. Is that good enough? So kind of that methodical approach that way.
You bring up a really interesting point. There was a report that I was reading, and I cannot remember the source off the top of my head, that was referring to how much marketing and sales spend, specifically SaaS-based organizations have in regards to their maturity timeline. So how much are they dedicating when they're 12 months old, for example, versus 1 to 3 years old, and so on and so forth. And some of those numbers for some of those SaaS-based companies, for example, was like they're spending 125% of revenue on sales and marketing. So in other words, they're losing money.
Yeah,
they're paying out more than is coming in.
Sounds like the cybersecurity market.
But then they're starting talking about how that changed a little bit when they went into essentially their growth phase. So launch phase, growth phase. And saying how it still was at 50 to 60%. They were spending 60% of their revenue on sales and marketing. And so when you start looking at that from a budgetary perspective, does that seem to be in line with what you're finding with most organizations, that they're spending as much as 50 to 60% on sales and marketing? It was actually lumping them together in regards to their revenues.
That sounds pretty generous to me. Now, there's always the devil's in the details of what exactly are we defining marketing productive spend or marketing productive and operation, all variable spend. Are you including staff, sales? So the number can have like 6 different definitions, but what I've seen just benchmark wise from Gartner, a few other sources, CMO survey, anywhere from 6 to 15%, but I don't believe those numbers included the sales. That was strictly the marketing all-in number. But that's another great point. When you go in to justify your budget, what I suggested was a top-down kind of calculation, a methodical approach of this is what you want to achieve. This is the value of what you want to achieve. We know our average deal size is X. We got a bunch of conversion rates. So I know the cost of acquiring a lead, what it should be. And we also know goals of how many leads we need to generate to hit that goal. So we calculate down, and then we can also do a bottom-up calculation and say, just looking at what I know we need to do, what we did last year, and we're going to add to it, and we're all in a room with ideas, we want to do this. Now we got another budget suggestion. And then you back that up also with benchmarks that are relevant to your organization's industry as well. So you got this trifecta of, hey, I'm head of marketing. I have a financial acumen. I'm not just the marketing guy that makes stuff look pretty. I've got, a top-down calculation of what our goal and budget alignment looks like, a bottom-up calculation. We can look at the delta and if anything looks funny. And then I'm also backing that with what are our peers doing in this industry by pulling those benchmarks as well.
Well, as you were talking about that, I started thinking about some organizations have said that they use what is referred to as like a zero line or zero sum approach in regards to their budgeting, meaning that every single year you've got to justify what you're doing instead of just taking last year's and making adjustment.
Yeah.
So also, I think it's important, like you had talked about as far as benchmarking data, and even what I was referring to, what I saw about that 50 to 60% is what goes into that number. So if I'm talking about salaries fully loaded and everything that goes along with it, your number is going to get up there.
Yeah.
But if I'm sitting there and just looking at, okay, we already have the people in place, that's coming from a different line item. That's the salaries and pieces aren't included in that. And I'm just looking at everything that I'm doing, all these levers that I'm pulling. Well, that's 15% of our revenue. That seems more realistic if I'm, comparing myself and I'm not lumping my salaries and everything. So, you have to kind of look at that, interpret that data appropriately. I worked for an organization and I was told when I was asking about things to do from a marketing perspective in order to fill our sales pipeline, it was told to me, I'm paying your salary, fill your own pipeline. Like, okay.
That approach, that's an interesting one. You have a bunch of mercenaries, owning their own patch of business. And I've seen that before too.
Absolutely. So I think the point being is that I may be unskilled and unaware when it comes to financial reporting and financial interpretation. And, asking my peers, and trying to get insights and information on the different budgetary types of methods, as well as, strategies, I think is important here because it's not as simple as it may seem. I've seen, like you were talking about, even from a metric perspective, looking at a shared contribution of impact. So in other words, okay, let's get agreement based on these particular revenue numbers. What percentage of it was contributed by the marketing group, and see what you're willing to live with. And because I think that's what you were talking about is, looking at that whole, fractional impact component and then being able to justify because everything is contributory in nature and related.
Yep. And I just thought of some, I'm sorry.
Please go ahead.
I was going to say that just reminded me of, we were talking about how do you solve that marketing attribution story with the multi-touch. And what I found, first of all, you just got to convince people that they see the world the same way that it really is, that is the case, and get them to understand that the most effective way I found that was to step away from the CRM dashboards and showing conversion rates and showing this came from email, this came from search, this came from BDRs, et cetera, and just go, let's do a reverse win analysis of our an ideal customer account that we recently won, and just reverse it and say, let's look at account X. And now with all that data I can go back a year, 2 years, whatever that journey was, and I can show them illustratively, make it visual. We're good at that in marketing, visual communications, and paint that picture, tell that story, and show that winding road that started 12 months ago off of an email newsletter, didn't do anything for 3 months, came back to the site out of the blue. Boop, 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 boop. They're bouncing all over the site. That triggered a nurture campaign and a remarketing campaign. Oh, look, I can show you that these ads were served up to them. You can start to see this busy dot chart of their activity as they warm up. And this is the day they became an opportunity in the CRM. And you can show that whole journey and with an example like that. And then I think they get it. And then everyone kind of backs off of that one touch, which channel is really working well, and throw all your money into that and cut all the rest. So if you show them that buyer journey of one of their ideal customers that they want to replicate, I want to do this customer again, find more of these. Look at this journey and look at the touch points and look at the channels they hit.
Well, and then I think as far as from that investment perspective, sometimes you may have to be going after the systems that allows you to report on that visibility.
Yeah. Have to have your MarTech stack in order. A lot of disparate systems. We're in a sea of data. We can track almost anything and everything, and then we're expected to, but there's a lot of data architecture, data mapping. This system calls this a lead. This system calls that a prospect. This system calls this a lead, but it's defined by just being a contact. But really a lead needs to be, they've engaged with us to a significant level and they match our ICP. So you got to map these systems to speak the same language, some data normalization.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that is one of the biggest gaps in all of this is the technology component. People talk about MarTech stack. They talk about all these different things. But the fact is that marketing has gotten so complex and there is no such thing as an all-encompassing, all-in-one solution. And if they market to you that way, you're going to find out it sucks. That's just the reality of things. So you have to be able to look at much to our chagrin, you know, what am I willing to go without?
Yep.
Because you're not going to get it all.
Right.
It's just not going to
what matters. Yeah.
And so that goes back to the, you know, the whole contributory piece and saying, okay, this is most important. We need to have this. This is why, you know, and then looking at some, you know, maybe some, you know, robotic, you know, process automation, some RPA stuff, maybe some other things, and just know that there is no such thing as, you know, all in one, all encompassing, even from the largest companies and names, you know, regardless of who they acquire, it ain't gonna work. And it's not. So you have to figure out what's going to work best in your environment, and it's unique to you.
Yep.
It just is. So if I'm sitting there and I'm looking at, okay, budget management and financial acumen, I'm looking at to, you know, lead the C-suite through alignment of goals and budgets.
Yep.
I'm looking at how to gain trust, you know, and, you know, focus in on, you know, executing and delivering. And all this is in concert and context of justifying my marketing budget and my strategies. Where do you find the biggest gap that exists for, you know, people who are in marketing roles?
I think it may be the biggest gap, arguably, but I think it's the most foundational piece to get right. And that's owning the expenses, first of all. It sounds really basic and tactical, but I see a lot of organizations are reliant or, you know, on the accounting team, the finance team to own all the expense management of the marketing team. And there's expenses flying left and right, you know, marketing, you know, a lot of small transactions, some big transactions, but a ton of transactions. But if the CMO is willing to let someone else handle that and they don't have their finger on the pulse of how much have I spent, how much is contracted but not yet spent, how much is planned and pinned for this, that, or the other, and how much is still unallocated that I still have wiggle room to maybe take advantage of. I think that financial accountability comes first. If you just say, hey, duplicate it if you need to. Track your own expenses in your own system. If accounting is doing it, fine and great. Even better, now you can compare notes, because sometimes things get lumped into marketing that aren't marketing. You find out when you do a little reconciliation report. You're like, what the heck is that? That's not marketing. How'd that get in there? So really show the organization that you are a great steward of the money they have already afforded to marketing. Show them that you're going to make sure every dollar is accounted for. And I think that gets you a long way into having those additional conversations about goal and OKR alignment, about performance metrics we need to track. If you can just show them that you care about every dollar that the organization has already invested, and you can pull those numbers up in a snap so that you can make strategic shifts, I think that goes a long way.
Okay, so if I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about, these different elements of, hey, I need to get the job done. We need to have visibility into all of this. We need to be reporting correctly. I'm starting to see that I essentially, even within my own marketing department, have 4 different personas I need to address.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't that seem more realistic? This conversation is peer level. This conversation is subordinate level. This is C level. And then I have, the board level. I've got to look at all these different personas that I need to be able to connect with.
Exactly. Yeah. You nailed it. I mean, I think at the top of the conversation talking about marketing hasn't done a great job in marketing to their internal personas, particularly that next level up, the C-suite, and the next level up to the boardroom, because we are busy doing what the job description says and talking to the market, talking to the prospects, talking to the customers, and building out that brand image. But yeah, oddly enough, we need to really be persistent and committed to consistently managing those conversations and recognizing that they are different personas, like you said. We don't talk, or we shouldn't lead with email open rates, ad click-through rates, website visits and bounce rates to the CRO, to the CEO, to the CFO. And I think because they don't know, also they are unaware what they're unaware of, and so they ask for those metrics. We've happily obliged in the past and will say, look at all this data I could bring with you. I nerd out over it. And then they're left unimpressed because they didn't know what else to ask for, because they don't, again, have that murkiness, like they said in the McKinsey report, about how do I measure marketing exactly? How do I hold them accountable? So they grasped at what they heard, and they were left unimpressed. So we need to recognize that, pump the brakes, flip the conversation into those investment and financial terms, and show them that, hey, we know how to speak that language. Let's talk about that first before we get into the speeds and feeds of open rates and click-through rates and all that stuff you really don't care about unless you really need to get under the hood if something's broken.
Well, as you're talking it to me, I think this as an issue as a whole, if we look at it from that perspective, having the business acumen and having the ability to make those internal agreements and all that stuff is probably one of the main contributing factors of why, the chief marketing officer position turns every 18 months or so, is that it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Come in and essentially I have this historical elephant that is in the room, and I just kind of fit into everything that they've been doing, instead of having, a scenario of, okay, that's what you used to do. That's not what healthy organizations are doing. This is what we're going to be doing. And then therefore, let's see if we can move this forward and turn it around.
Absolutely. Yeah. Comes down to, I think we as marketing professionals can solve it because we understand personas, we understand target audiences, we understand their behaviors, their pain points, and solutions. We need to apply that internally as well and use that same understanding to speak to our sales VP peer over here and to speak to the CEO and CFO up there and get that seat at the table so that they will trust us and go, let you tell the story to the board because you explained it to me really well. I think, and I see that you have that financial acumen and that awareness of managing your budget, and you're on top of all of the financials. You know what matters to us. So I'm going to let you tell your story to the board instead of us filtering it.
Well, if I start looking at all of this, and we originally started out with being able to justify your marketing budget and strategy, and as we were going through, to me, it just seemed like we were really discussing all the elements and components and the structure that's necessary in order for that to occur.
Yeah.
So if I look at scenarios and situations of that story that I told you before, where they just kind of whack things, and that's kind of a situation that just occurs out of a whole lot of a fear. We're talking about getting ready and heading into a recession. We're talking about all these other things. We're talking about marketplace volatility and all. I mean, all of those fears have to be, put to rest so that brash decision, doesn't get made, because it kills the organization in the long run.
Right.
So if I was to say, I get stuck, in a situation where it's a lot of fear mongering and a lot of fear driven, I mean, do I essentially just start cutting my losses and look for the next opportunity? Or do I sit there and I try to have some resiliency and I fight to get my justification and implement my budget strategy?
It's an awesome question. I'm maybe loyal to a fault, and so I kind of maybe gravitate toward beating my head against the same wall for a really long time. But with that experience, I'd say at some point you really have to be realistic and go, is this just going to be stifle my career because they're just not going to get it and they're going to keep doing the same mistakes and they're going to continue to say, okay, that revenue model made sense. However, we still have to tell the board we're going to hit X dollars and you're still going to get Y dollars budget. And 11 months later, we'll face the music and just kick this can down the road. And when we don't hit those goals, then it'll turn into finger pointing later toward the end. And so you want to avoid that and to kind of see the writing on the wall, I guess, better sooner than later.
It's just the reality of things. And that's what we talk about when we talk about culture.
Yeah.
That's really it. I mean, I have a culture by which it's a little more toxic. It's a little more cutthroat, and we have a scenario where people like to finger point. We don't necessarily creatively think and collaborate and innovate. It's all about results, baby, which that's fine, and there's marketers who are successful in that type of arena. And, but for me, I have a little bit too many years put under my belt, and that's not where I want to be.
Yeah.
So, Aaron Branson, man, great conversation, great perspective taking, looking at this from a viewpoint that oftentimes we unfortunately don't take time to do. And I think it's part of our consequences when we start looking at our health and well-being and impact that we can make within the roles that we are. But how does the B2B DM gang get in touch with you?
Well, easiest way is to find me on LinkedIn. Aaron Branson. Some pronounce that Aaron since the famous skit. So if that helps you spell it, Aaron Branson. Also look us up on, I've taken a lot of this passion for this topic in particular and been trying to, build spreadsheets upon spreadsheets and PowerPoints upon PowerPoints to try to solve this. But working on a new platform called RevUp. So www.revup.marketing. If you would check that out, we're not live yet, but so we're in the building phase and excited. But that's where you can find me.
Actually, I'm going to stop. We're going to edit that out because This episode is actually supposed to be released on June 6th.
Oh, okay. Oh, June.
Yeah, June 6th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So here's the thing. You don't want to date it.
No, right. What did it? Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and do that close again and keep you up.
Okay.
Just knowing that that's what our release date is.
Gotcha.
So
where should I start with the whole the LinkedIn first? Yeah. Oh yeah, you're going to tee it up.
I am going to tee it up.
Okay.
So man, that was great insights shared, and man, I really appreciate you giving us some perspectives on a very important element of the work that we do. That's going to allow us to not put us in jeopardy, right? So Aaron Branson, how does the B2B DM gang get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is the easiest way. My name's Aaron Branson, Aaron Branson, so Aaron Branson. And otherwise, look me up on www.revup.marketing. It's a new platform that I've co-founded to address this exact problem. I'm very passionate about trying to bridge this gap between the C-suite and the head of marketing so that we can really uncork growth for these organizations.
Aaron Branson, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thanks, Jim. Great talking to you.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2BDM gang in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2BDM disruptors and get access to our B2BDM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.